Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 29. So we got 7 new topics to talk about, and what are they today?
We got Trump's war coat, Jon Gruden resigning in disgrace, Trump supporter boycott, strikes, Colin Powell died in Covidiot Dennis Prager, and Biden caving and reducing the price of the infrastructure bill from $3.5 trillion to zero.
So, what do you want to talk about first?
Let's start out with Trump's war coat.
Aha! This one we've tried to do for several episodes, but we never got around to doing it. So, of course, for all of you who don't know, Trump actually tried to instigate war with not only Iran, but China too, when he lost to Biden.
Yep, he tried to start World War III.
And of course, his thought process is that, oh, when a country is in a crisis like a war, the country will unite around me, and therefore, you can't get rid of me, I have to stay president, so get lost, Dementia Joe, even though you won the election fair and square. And of course, oh my god, what a bunch of idiot he is. And I think Kyle had a video on it, let's see, I think I have it right here. And of course, it also talked about him actually having to talk to his counterpart in China, who they, and pretty much all like the other military powers of the world, were nervous as hell when January 6th happened. So let's watch Kyle's video on that.
I'm a former CIA.
So there's a big story that came out the other day. We learned this from Bob Woodward's new book. Apparently, General Milley secretly undercut Trump and overrode him after January 6th. So there were concerns among our allies and among other nations that what the hell's going on over there? This is crazy. This is unstable. We need to be reassured by the Americans that everything's under control. And so General Milley was in contact with Nancy Pelosi, CIA, the NSA, and China. And basically the message was like, Trump ain't in charge. I'm in charge. So it was almost like a shadow coup in a way. Now the reason I say shadow is because he didn't physically take over and become president and, actually do a military coup. He just said, I'm operating behind the scenes and I'm really the one who's pulling the strings, and if he does something that I don't agree with, we're going to nip it in the bud. So here's CNN reporting on this. Pay attention carefully to what they say in every part of this clip, because there is sort of like a contradictory message in here. So let's watch, and then I'm going to come back and tell you guys my breakdown.
Dramatic breaking news. The peril of Trump. America's top general, just 2 days after the January 6th Capitol insurrection, so worried about the then president's angry and erratic behavior, he called a secret meeting with top deputies, including the chain of command for the country's nuclear arsenal. General Mark Milley's message at that meeting, no one was to act on any orders for military strikes, even from the president, unless Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was personally involved in the sign-off as called for by Pentagon protocols. Details of that extraordinary top-secret Pentagon meeting among the many startling new revelations about the final days of the Trump presidency in Peril, the brand new book by the legendary Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward and his colleague at the Post, Robert Costa. Our CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel obtained an early copy of this book, and she is with us now. Wow.
John, Woodward and Costa, as you say, report that General Mark Milley took top secret action to limit President Trump's ability to make a military strike or to use nuclear weapons. Let me just set the stage from the book. According to Woodward and Costa, on January 8th, Milley is deeply shaken from the assault on the Capitol on the 6th. He believes Trump, to your point, is unstable, unpredictable, and Woodward and Costa write, Milley believes that Trump is in serious mental decline. He also has been talking back channel to the Chinese. He is aware from intelligence that the Chinese are on edge because of January 6th and because of Trump's behavior. So he's trying to reassure them behind the scenes. And Milley tells his senior staff, quote, you never know what a president's trigger point is. Against this backdrop, same day, January 8th, Milley gets a call from Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. We've heard about this call, but Woodward and Costa got an exclusive transcript of the call. Pelosi has the same concerns that Milley does. The phone call is dramatic, it is blunt, and Pelosi wants Milley to reassure her that the nuclear weapons are safe. And this is the exchange. Pelosi, who knows what he might do? He's crazy. You know he's crazy. He's been crazy for a long time. So don't say you don't know what his state of mind is. He's crazy, and what he did yesterday, meaning actually 2 days ago, January 6th, is further evidence of his craziness. General Milley says, Madam Speaker, I agree with you on everything. Milley reassures Pelosi on the call, but when he gets off, he thinks to himself, she's right. and he decides to take this extraordinary action.
So they write in the book.
And of course, before we continue on, Trumpsters act like this is like something new. This actually is not new whatsoever. This actually happened before, like when Nixon resigned, like the days beforehand too. So this is nothing new whatsoever.
About this secret
Pretty
memo
common
that
when it
General
comes to
Milley
things
found
like this.
without his knowledge. The president
Oh,
was
yeah,
trying to
from Biden
quickly
at some
get out
point.
of Afghanistan before he left office.
Milley had proof that President Trump could go rogue. He had done it once before. A week after Trump loses the election, on November 11th, this memo, a military directive, shows up unexpectedly at the Pentagon. It is a secretly drafted and signed by the president memo saying you're to get out of Afghanistan by January 15th before Trump's presidency is over. There's just one problem. No one on the national security team, no one at the Pentagon knew that this had been drafted and signed. It had been done by two Trump loyalists at the White House. They had done an end run around the national security team.
So here's what they're saying.
Now, of course, before we continue on, they didn't talk about the Iran shit. This actually wasn't related to January 6th. This was more like around like Thanksgiving, where he wanted to do strikes on Iran.
Basically, it feels like on two different occasions. Once around Thanksgiving, the other he lost just after he lost the election.
And there was
on two separate occasions he tried to start World War III.
Yeah, it also
on power.
It also happened in June of 2019 when they shot down that drone over their territory as well. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I think it was they were within 10 minutes of doing it before he decided to not do the attack. Like within 10 minutes. Like, that's how close it was.
10 minutes away from the start of World War III. That is insane.
And even fucking, like, Pompeo and all the other neocons tried to talk him out of it in November. Because their argument was, all it's going to do is just cause problems for the next administration. Which, hey, at least they admitted that Biden wanted it to his face. So now, let's get into this part.
Here, why this is such a confusing story. Because, on the one hand, they're saying, look, after January 6th, Trump was acting in a very erratic way. They think he basically snapped, and he was in mental decline, and he was unhinged, and Lord only knows what he's going to do. And at the start, they say, hey, don't let him launch the nukes. You know, don't let him start a war, because who the hell knows what's going on here? It looks like...
And also, for anyone a little bit concerned, it is protocol that the president just can't launch nuclear weapons. It's like a huge chain of command thing, unless it's like instant, like nuclear holocaust, like all of a sudden happens. He can't just launch them on his will. So this is like nothing like had to be done out of the blue. This is just standard protocol.
There was an attempted coup, and he was sort of egging it on, and so everybody behind the scenes was like, this is chaos, this is wild, this is scary. And the idea was, this is what they're saying at the beginning of the clip. The idea was, hey, assure China, assure whoever else, our allies, don't worry, everything's under control here. We're going to make sure that things don't get too out of hand, and I'm not going to let that guy press the red button. I'm not going to let him do that. That's what they say at the beginning. Then notice, at the end, what did they say? Oh, Trump drafted a memo, a special order, to withdraw fully from Afghanistan before he leaves office. And they say, well, he didn't tell the intelligence agencies. He didn't tell the Pentagon. He didn't tell many in his staff. How could he do such a... Wait, whoa. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the president of the United States. The idea of withdrawing from Afghanistan is wildly popular, as we've still seen because Biden did it. Now, the way he did it, of course, people don't give him high marks, but that's because the media does relentless propaganda. Look, I digress from that. Fact of the matter is, Trump is the commander-in-chief. He has every right to withdraw troops if he wants to withdraw troops. And in doing so, he would be representing the will of the American people. So at the end, they say, Milley needed to intervene to stop Trump from withdrawing from Afghanistan. Well, hold on. You were just telling me he intervened to stop a war, to prevent a war, to stop Trump from pressing the red button. Now you're telling me he actually intervened for the opposite reason, which is to keep a war going. Which is it? So, listen. It looks to me like... I mean, I guess you could say they had both things in mind. Like,
what?
I suspect both.
Yeah.
The reason why Milley talked to Pelosi, talked to the CIA and the NSA, talked to China, said, hey, everything's cool, is because he wanted to let everybody know, hey, it's not going to get any more out of hand than this. I'm in control. I'm the steady hand at the wheel. That's an argument for maybe one of the ways it went down. But I also do tend to believe that last part where they're saying, also, he sort of overrode the memo that said we need to get out of Afghanistan. So here's the thing. If Milley intervened to prevent a nuclear strike on another country, he's a hero. He's a hero. I don't care about your, what does the law say? What's the chain of command and the paperwork and if he nukes Botswana, does he follow the right protocols? I don't care about the protocols if he's going to nuke Botswana. I want you to stop him from nuking Botswana. So if that's the case, he's a
And not only did he stop him, they did technically follow protocol too.
hero.
Yeah.
But if it's the case that he intervened to prevent the Afghanistan withdrawal, he's a villain. It's possible it was both things. Hey, I'm going to stop him from doing another war, but I'm also going to keep him in the war we're currently in. I guess that's possible. But honestly, it seems to me more like it was just the latter. I'm just guessing, I'm just speculating, but we know how that deep state works. And it strikes me like, yes, there was a lot of chaos, yes, there was a lot of mayhem, but for him to say, I'm going to override this special order to pull out of Afghanistan, I definitely am against him doing that. Definitely am against him doing that. And in that instance, then I understand people more saying, well, wait a second, he's the commander-in-chief. He's in charge. You weren't democratically elected. He was democratically elected. Agree or disagree with Trump, he was. And he was carrying out the will of the American people if indeed he was going to pull out. So that's why this story is so complicated and this story is so confusing. If General Milley both prevented a war and kept us in a war, I don't know what my reaction is, because that's just chaos and mayhem, and one of the things he did would be
like a mixed bag.
bad, and one of the things he did would be good. If he just prevented a war, then he'd be good. If he just kept us in a war, then he'd be bad. So I don't know. I don't know what actually went down here, but my suspicion is he didn't prevent a war. He didn't prevent a war. He kept us in the Afghanistan war. And he went around the commander-in-chief to do it, which is not okay. Which is not okay at all. Because then, and here's the way to think about this, guys. Let's say Bernie Sanders was president. Let's say Bernie Sanders orders the withdrawal from Iraq. And Milley or some general does the same shit and says, we're not going to abide by that order. We'd all look at that and say, well, then we're not a democracy. This isn't the United States of America anymore. We're a police state. That's an authoritarian, dictatorial, tyrannical end run.
They didn't stop
It's
Biden
a
from doing it, though.
military coup, basically. Even though he didn't technically take over, if he's overriding the president on an issue where the president is representing the American people, you can't do that. So, I mean, listen, that's my breakdown of it. I know that, it's sort of like it's messy to talk about it all because there are different possible scenarios. Like, if it is true, I don't need to run through it again. You already heard me say it a million times. But the fact of the matter is, if he both prevented a war and kept us in a war, that's just astounding and weird and total chaos, and he's half hero, half villain. If he just prevented a war, he's a hero. If he just kept us in a war, he's a villain. You understand? So anyway, that's where I stand on this. But either way,
honestly, I think if it was the case that he stopped him from withdrawing Afghanistan, I think it would probably be more of that. It was like near the end of his term when he's about to be gone. So it's like, what do you do? And when you're about to be gone, affect the policy of the next upcoming president. And because he was insane after like January 6th. So if they did stop him, that's probably why. What do you think?
I think so.
Either way, the precedent is not good. And in order to understand that, you just have to imagine a president who you like, in theory, doing something good, and then that being shut down by the generals with no recourse.
Because, I mean, at the same time, they didn't stop Biden from withdrawing.
American. That is... That would be such a terrible precedent that, again, we cease to really exist as we imagine ourselves. So, this is a wild story. And, of course, you're going to have... I've already seen the reaction to this. You're going to have... The people who support Trump are going to say, how dare you undermine the president? You can't do that. That's unconstitutional. That's illegal.
What just happened?
You're trying to force us to stay in a war that he wanted to pull out of. The Trump people are going to defend him. But then you have the Democrats who are now think Milley's a hero, regardless of what Milley did, Even if Milley kept us in Afghanistan and overrode the commander-in-chief, I think a lot on the Democratic side would be, thank God that a serious adult was in charge. Well, no. I guess you could say he was a serious adult if he was preventing a war, but if he was keeping us in one, that's not serious adult stuff. That's like evil, comic book villain, military-industrial complex serving stuff, So, wild story, man. Wild story. You could only hope that the real reason why the establishment was so iffy on Trump is just because he's such an unhinged character personally. You know what I mean? And so you just hope that if there's a president who gets to power who's just seemingly not unhinged, that all of a sudden they'll respect the way things are supposed to work a little bit more. Because if this is a precedent that's set and it continues forward, it's like, why even have elections? So, wow. It's always interesting to learn that behind the scenes, on January 6th, it was just as chaotic as it looked in front of the scenes. It's a scary thought, but it's true. That as we're watching everything unfold and go, what the hell's going on here? People with a lot of authority and a lot of power looking at it saying the same damn thing. So, very wild, very tumultuous time in American history.
Yeah, I think it mostly was Trump was like too unhinged. That's pretty much what I think it is. Because in the end, like we said, they didn't stop Biden from withdrawing. Even if they tried to, they didn't do anything. So that was probably more of what the case is. So what do you guys say about this, though?
I reckon it's a case of both. That he both stopped Trump pulling out of Afghanistan, but also stopped Trump starting World War III.
Yeah, and of course, as bad as the Afghanistan occupation was, World War III, which Trump would have started, would have made Afghanistan occupation look like nothing in comparison. Oh my god, that would be so terrible. Alright, so, anything else you guys say about his war cope that he lost?
That is hilarious.
Because, well, there is one difference, though, Trump and Trumpsters. Unlike, say, Pearl Harbor or 9/11, which helped FDR and Bush's approval, we were attacked. This would be the opposite, where he would try to attack Iran or China, which the majority of Americans don't like. So it would backfire spectacularly. And also, to Trump's main point, even if he started, and even if the American people rally around him, it doesn't change the fact that he lost and he would be gone in 2 months. There's nothing that was going to change that. Alright, so now what do you want to talk about next?
Let's do Jon Gruden resigning in disgrace.
Okay, so this is an NFL topic, so I'm definitely going to know a lot about this. So for all of you who don't follow the NFL like me, Jon Gruden, he was the former coach of the Las Vegas Raiders NFL team. He coached them from 1998 to 2001. Then he was the Buccaneers coach from 2002 to 2008. Then he was an announcer for ESPN for like the next 10 years after that, before coming back to coach the Raiders in 2018. Well, just like I think it was 2 weeks ago, he was forced to resign because a whole bunch of emails were leaked to the public with him and Bruce Allen, who at the time was the general manager of the Washington football team, where he said so many really, really cringy things. And oh god, it was bad. He said things that were easily thought as racist, sexist, homophobic, and a whole bunch of other crap if you want to go through them all.
Oh boy, let's see what he said.
Well, the first thing that came out, because it was 2 things. First, the first thing that came out was that an email was leaked back in 2011 when he worked on ESPN, where he said DeMaurice Smith, I think his name was, who, at least at the time, was like the main man of the NFL Players Association, had like big lips or something like that, and he's black, so that's a pretty racist, like, trope stereotype of blacks. Like, you should know that. That should be pretty obvious. Even if you're not saying it in a racist context, you should be able to see why people would view it as racist. So that happened. That was leaked like on Friday, because he resigned 3 days later on Monday. He talked about on Sunday after they lost to the Bears, and then that Sunday or Monday before he resigned, the rest of the emails came out, and woo boy, if you thought that was bad, it gets pretty dumb and stupid and worse. So let's start off with the least bad things. First off, he thinks Joe Biden's a pussy. Whoop-de-doo, who cares? Who cares? He called Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the NFL, a faggot.
He's got a nice bit of homophobia there.
Well, he's not gay, but you know he's using it as like a slur of like he's weak, basically. And that he's an anti-football pussy, because what he's talking about is Gruden is more of like the old school coaches and fans that don't like that the NFL is barely really trying to combat like concussions in the league. Like they're like cutting back like on big hits and stuff like that. And they don't like that. So he's saying Goodell's a faggot for trying to make the league more safer and stuff like that. It's not like really actual good football anymore, if you get what I'm saying. Like, dude, well, one, I kind of agree somewhat. I like the big hits and all that, but it's unsafe. We need to try and cut back on to make it more safe. And more importantly, was the faggot really necessary? Was it really that necessary? Like, come
Yeah,
on.
why don't think it was?
Like, good God. He doesn't like that the players need during the national anthem. He called them all pussies and all that, which whoop-de-doo, but big deal. Cope more. So those are probably like some of the least problematic ones. Then we're gonna get into even more. One, he has a problem with women being referees.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, because there's only, last I know of, there's only one woman referee in the NFL, and she joined, I think, like back in 2016. And my question is, why is it a big deal if a woman is a referee? Like, what's the difference? There's really no physical requirements whatsoever. I mean, they have to run around sometimes to avoid getting hit on the field, but not really that much physical needs like NFL players need. So why is it a big deal unless you have a problem with them being referees in the first place? I think that was pretty blatantly misogynistic. What do you think?
Yeah, that's pretty blatantly misogynistic.
Hey,
That is.
if you think she sucks, guess what? All the referees sucked the last few years, so it's everyone, not just the woman. Jesus Christ. And then of course, he thinks, and he doesn't like that the NFL tried to pressure teams to sign faggots. And I mean as the actual term. And he's talking about, have you ever heard of Michael Sam?
No.
He was a defensive end that was drafted near the end of the 2014 draft by the St. Louis Rams, and he at the time was the first openly gay player to be in the NFL when they drafted him. And he thinks the NFL pressured the Rams to draft him instead of it being like they actually wanted him. Like a social justice like thing, basically, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now the Rams, still this day, back in even 2014, they just, no, we drafted him because we feel like he fills a need that we don't have. Sadly, though, he was cut after the preseason, even though I thought he did good enough to at least get on the team, but I digress on that. But really, even if you don't like that the NFL is pressuring them, even though I don't believe that, was the faggot comment really needed? Like, come on.
It was not.
Like, that is pretty homophobic in that regard because you're actually referring to a gay player. And that's pretty cringy, too, because right now the Raiders, who he's the coach of, have the only openly gay player in the league. That's pretty cringy. I feel bad for Carl Nassib hearing that now. Whoo, boy. Oh, my goodness. So what do you guys say about this email? That he was forced to resign for this. And it's
pretty cringy stuff.
Yeah, but you know what's sad and worse though?
What?
Well, thankfully they're starting to talk about this now. A lot of the media is talking about Gruden and not talking about the other problem in this. Like, remember I mentioned before he was talking to Bruce Allen, the former general manager of the football team?
Yes.
Well, for all of you who don't know, the football team, at the time when they were the Redskins, when he was their general manager, they have severe problems in the organization. Not that they're just a bad team. Like, there's a massive, rot in the entire team. To the point where, this is pretty bad, they actually would force their cheerleaders to do stuff topless for VIP people, like in Puerto Rico.
Jeez.
Bruce Allen actually showed Gruden pictures of the topless cheerleaders. So now,
oh my God.
So now the scandal's open up to, now we gotta look into that now about how serious this allegation is, because this has been a problem for the last 2 years, and the NFL's not take it seriously whatsoever until just now.
Jeez.
It is really, really bad. The football team is the worst run team in the league. All the way up to top to the freaking piece of shit owner, Daniel Snyder. That team is just absolutely awful. Awful on the field and awful in front office and everything. It's pretty bad too.
Evidently.
What?
Evidently, from what I've heard.
What'd you say?
Evidently, as I heard.
Yeah, oh my God. This is pretty bad. It's bad enough that they're, forced to do, swimsuit calendars, which like all the teams do, but this is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Ugh. And of course, I think the football team's cheerleaders have had a lawsuit about this a few years ago, and I think other teams have sued, other cheerleader of their teams sued their teams for the same reasons and stuff like that. So yeah, this definitely needs to be looked into. And hopefully, if it's really, really bad, hopefully maybe it can lead to some sort of sanction against the football team. What would be the best case scenario? Maybe forcing Daniel Snyder to sell his team, because he is like the worst owner in the league whatsoever. Like, do you want me to tell you how bad he's run the football team since he owned him in 1999?
Okay, let's hear how bad it is.
Since 1999, guess how many times the football team's made the playoffs? In 20...
How many?
Just 6 times out of like 20 plus seasons.
Okay.
So, they're bad on the field. He's had like the worst free agent signs for like the last 20 years. All these $100 million contracts to people who'd be gone after 2 years because they were so bad and overrated. He did terrible drafting because he's like the general manager of the team. So he like pretty much like controls everything. He can't draft for shit. He can't sign for shit. He is a greedy ass fucking owner who's trying to get the DC and Landover to build a whole new stadium, even though FedEx Field's not even 25 years old. He's greedy as fuck. And oh, top it off too, since he's Jewish, if you criticize him, he calls you an anti-Semite.
No.
He's a Jerry Jones wannabe without the success. He is fucking terrible. So we gotta see about this.
Pretty nasty stuff.
Pretty bad too, because pretty much most of my dad's family is football team fans, so you got one how it feels for them. I'm sure they're still mad that they had to change the name, and then this crap happened.
That wouldn't surprise me.
So yeah, and also, let's not deny the reality that Gruden was the fall guy. We all know deep down that this is very, very common in the, not just the NFL, but probably sports in general with stuff like this.
Yeah.
So, gotta keep looking into this shit, and hopefully the football team also gets some sort of sanction for what they did with the cheerleaders, because can't be the only one that there's some sort of criticism for this, because this is bad. They're making him look like the worst person here when, no. The football team's in a worse spot than him. He just said terrible things. They actually did terrible things.
Yeah.
All right.
So next up will be Jon Gruden resigning in disgrace.
We just talked about that. I think you mean Trump supporter boycott?
Oh yes, that's what I mean. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted.
So,
I'm very distracted there.
So, this is an interesting thing. As I said before, if Biden won, I think the Democrats are going to lose that whole entire Congress, because that's been the trend since like 2006. In the midterms, the opposition party usually wins, just like in 2006, the Democrats won the House and Senate when Bush was in office. Then in 2010, the Republicans won the House under Obama. Then they won the Senate in 2014 under Obama. Then in 2018, the Democrats won the House under Trump. So the trend to me shows that Biden's gonna lose Congress, which will suck in that regard. But
spend all their time impeaching him every day.
Yep. But there's a counter to that we just found out, because. Well, there's two things that we actually might have to consider that might change that in 2022. One, COVID might be still a thing, remember? Like, if you told me, like, around this time, or whenever the vaccine came out, that COVID would still be a threat into, like, this late into 2021, I wouldn't believe it. I thought it would be, like, mostly a non-existent issue by then. But, of course, I didn't expect the anti-vaxxer movement to be as strong, and then idiot Trumpsters denying the vaccine as strong as they are. So, who knows, COVID might be a thing still in 2022, which of course leads to multiple things. One, the vast majority of the people that aren't vaccinated and dying are Trumpsters. So, they actually might die off and make it more easier for us to win. And not only that, since the majority of the country still actually takes COVID seriously, and they don't like, as we saw in California's recall election, when idiot conservatives try to not take COVID seriously, they come out and vote en masse, and that was a big reason why I think Trump lost in 2020 was because of COVID. So it's like a double. So it's like a double whammy in that regard, possibly. But there's also another big thing too, and as we mentioned, Trump supporter boycott. Trump might actually tell his supporters to not vote in the elections because they think it's all rigged. Remember?
Yeah.
And of course,
every election ever is rigged according to them.
And of course, we have precedent for this. Like when they didn't vote by mail because they didn't believe it was all fraud. That was like why I think it was like in most cases like up to 90+% of mail-in ballots were for Biden and Democrats because people actually took COVID seriously enough to do the mail-in ballots, like Mayumi and Adam did too, and other people. So they think that's rigged. What?
Yeah, an interesting thing there is that there is actually one state where the Trump supporters actually had a brain and actually some of them did actually vote by mail.
And what's that?
Arizona, because Trump almost retook Arizona on some of the mail-in ballots.
Yeah, and another thing too is, for all of you who don't remember, the day before January 6th happened too, we had the Georgia runoff primaries for their 2 Senate races.
Yeah.
And Trump actually told his supporters to not vote in that election because it's all rigged. And I've seen reports.
And I lost as a result.
And of course, the Democrats won by close margins. And from what I've seen, I think I heard up to 40% of Trump supporters actually did boycott the election. Which
Holy
is
crap! Definitely cost them the election.
Yeah, so that alone helped the Democrats tie the Senate. So Trump telling them to boycott the election actually did help us in that regard. So if he tells them to boycott the races in 2022 and maybe 2024 if he doesn't get the nomination, maybe he could help us win, maybe. So there's so many...
How ironic would that be? How ironic would that be?
Yep, and like we said, it's already happened, so it's not like something we're making up of our head. It already happened before, and this year too, it could maybe happen again. So although I still think the Democrats are going to probably lose, I can't be sure of that anymore because of all these wild cards with COVID and Trump. So he's got to keep waiting and seeing. So what do you have to say about it?
Then we can actually win.
Or, and you know what, too? Even if, regardless if they vote or not, if you die, too, that also helps, sadly, for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because, after all, you're not taking the pandemic seriously like the rest of us. So if you want to keep dying, go right ahead. But we're trying to save your ass. But I will admit at the same time, you dying also helps us. As pretty disappointing as it is. Alright, so is that enough for this topic?
I think so.
So, now what do you want to talk about?
The really funny bits. Colin Powell dying and Covidiot.
What about the strikes?
Oh yeah, the strikes are next.
Alright, so I guess you're reading the wrong one. So anyways, of course, there have been a lot of strikes lately so far this month, which is very, very important for workers' rights in this country since we're so bad in that regard, be it with John Deere, and of course Netflix with Dave Chappelle's thing, although that's more like a social thing instead of an economic thing, sadly. And there are other places that are having strikes that need it too. I think Kyle or Mike had a video I posted earlier. I don't see it, sadly. So yeah, what do you guys see about this? As I go look at the video.
Good one. Good thing that it's happening.
Wait, I think actually...
For workers' rights, for improved conditions, things like that. It's really, really good and about time.
Yep. And here we go. Here's Rational National's video.
We need to let them know that they can't continue to take our money and take our money and take our money.
Over
This is about the John Deere strike that just happened recently.
10,000 John Deere employees represented by the United Auto Workers have gone on strike. So this is after 90% of the workers rejected John Deere's latest proposal, a proposal that included pay hikes which were being offset by pension cuts for new hires. Now, in a minute here, I will also show you a surprisingly fantastic breakdown of this from ABC News of all places. But before I get there. I'm going to break it down here myself. So this strike is over wages, rest periods, and meal breaks. John Deere, the company, is expected to make nearly $6 billion in profits this year. Workers correctly identifying that they are the ones responsible for the vast majority of those profits and expect a pay raise because of it. So they are on strike now, and let me first show you their announcement here. So the UAW saying, quote, "Our members at John Deere strike for the ability to earn a decent living, retire with dignity, and establish fair work rules. We stay committed to bargaining until our members' goals are achieved." And that's from the UAW Vice President Chuck Browning. Now, our own reaction here. Bernie Sanders, one of several pro-labor lawmakers standing in solidarity with these employees. Bernie Sanders tweeting out, "Profits at John Deere have skyrocketed by some 61% in recent years, while its CEO's salary has exploded by 160% since the start of the pandemic. Please do not tell me they cannot afford to pay their workers fairly. I am proud to stand in solidarity with United Auto Workers members on strike." One more thing here from More Perfect Union. So they say here striking John Deere workers in Ottawa. Apologies for the pronunciation there, but in Iowa. Tell us that there are over 120 people on the picket line. Restaurants are bringing down food for picketing workers and giving in-store discounts to union members. And Teamsters and UPS workers are refusing to cross the picket line. Fantastic. Now, I will show you, before I get to the video from ABC, I'm going to show you what John Deere right now is trying to do to replace these workers. But first here, Jonah Furman has done a fantastic job. His reporting on this from labornotes.org, so I will link to his article and these tweets below the video as well, so you can read through those. But he tweets out here in early September, Deere presented a disastrously bad first offer to the membership. They likely wanted to lower expectations by super lowballing them, but ended up pissing everybody off, and members authorized a strike by 99%. On Sunday, members shocked both the union and the company by rejecting the contract by a whopping 90%, with 90% of members voting. This seems to have been a wake-up call to the UAW, who quickly announced a strike deadline of tonight. So it's worth pointing out here that, union leadership often is not in line with the actual members, which is why they appear to be shocked by the rejection of the latest offer. But here you have the members speaking up, the ones being heard here, and the ones pushing for this strike. Going on, Jonah Furman says, "The Deere strike in particular is about corporate profits against stagnating wages, decades of two-tier and concessionary contracts coming home to roost, a member revolt against the status quo, tacitly endorsed by the status quo, and tight labor market and the pandemic."
This is like one of the very, very, very good things that happened because of the pandemic, and that's workers' rights are having a renewal because now we have the power to do it. Sadly,
that's really good to know.
Yep, that's like sadly one of the very good things about COVID is that workers' rights now have more power now because, hey, we were stuck at home, now we're not making much money, and you have labor shortages, now we're in charge, and if you want us to work, you're going to give us what we want, and that's the end of it.
Amazing to see workers finally standing up for themselves, and as I'll get to in a minute here, it isn't just these John Deere workers. There are several strikes and potential strikes going on all across the U.S. Now, this is what John Deere is attempting to do to replace these workers. So this from Labor Notes. Deere sees the writing on the wall. Salaried workers who aren't in the union shared with Labor Notes details of Deere's customer service continuation plan. The company's plan to use salaried employees to keep the plants running during a strike. Quote, "They've been having about one meeting a week with employees eligible for the CSC plan starting 3 weeks ago," wrote one salaried employee. Anonymously for fear of retaliation, their attitude was that a strike was not happening and this is normal. But in more recent days, that clearly the tone shift, and they began basically intimating that, yes, you are going to have to be replacing these workers. And it's good to see this, at least in my position. This is from one of the people's salaried employees that are being pushed to replace these workers. In my position, I'm not looking forward to this. I think the wage employees deserve a lot more than what they were offered, and I absolutely support them striking. This employee does go on to say, though, I mean, you may be wondering, if they're in support, then why are they willing to replace these workers? But the worker says here, "I feel like I am betraying some of my values by crossing the picket line, but it has been all but said that not crossing the picket line means getting fired if you are salaried." So these salaried workers, out of fear of them losing their jobs and being fired, are willing to replace these positions. That said, if the salaried workers were able to get together and just refuse to do so, they're not going to fire all the salaried employees. So there would be a way for them here to work together in a union-type fashion, even though they're not union. But these particular employees could be working together to try and bust up this plan. Now, let me get to this shockingly great segment here from Good Morning America, particularly ABC News, on this strike and also other strikes that are going on.
This morning, 10,000 workers at John Deere hit the picket lines in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas. They argued that even as the agricultural equipment company's profits grew by 61% in recent years, and their CEO's salary grew by 160% during the pandemic, their pay has actually been cut.
We need to let them know that they can't continue to take our money and take our money and take our money.
Across the country, labor is on the march. In California and Oregon, 24,000 nurses and other healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente voted to authorize a strike over pay and better working conditions.
Hell yeah.
Meanwhile, union workers at Kellogg's cereal plants have been on strike for more than a week, angry about long hours, including 7-day work weeks.
Our number one priority is to get back to the negotiation table and reach a contract so our employees can get back to their jobs and their lives.
And soon, Hollywood may see a walkout. 60,000 film and TV crew members could walk off the job Monday over what they claim are unfair working conditions.
Our hours are really grueling, and we need not just rest between the workdays and over the weekend, but an hour.
You know, I also would like to see a strike like this happen? The video game industry. Because they are fucked over so badly. Overworked to death.
A number of workers are quitting their jobs. 4.3 million Americans, or 2.9% of the workforce, left their jobs in August. Many are looking.
So, you hear that, guys? 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs in August alone. Because people are just not going to take your shit. We're not going to take your shit anymore. You're going to give us what we want, and that's the end of it. Our wages have been stagnant since the 80s, while your profits have multiplied by hundreds of percent. Like that one the John Deere CEO. 160% increase in pay in just 1.5 years during COVID. So, no, that is unreasonable.
Looking for better work conditions and pay, especially with inflation on the rise. Several forces are driving all of this. As the pandemic comes to an end, companies are seeing sky-high demand and very tight labor markets. They're having trouble filling jobs. Workers notice that top executives and bosses are getting paid, and so for the first time in a long time, workers have the upper hand.
Yep.
Incredible.
And for some.
Great segment here from ABC, pointing out, harping on the fact that you have bosses and the CEOs, the executives of these companies, making a ton. You had the, as mentioned by earlier by Bernie Sanders and in that segment, the CEO's salary exploded by 160% since the start of the pandemic. So you can't do that as the CEO and then not expect your workers to also see a similar increase in their pay when they are the ones delivering you the profits. So it's amazing to see this. I love the energy.
If anything, it should be reversed. They should be getting more of a 160% increase while you get nothing, since you're already making billions and billions of dollars a year.
Out there, people are standing up finally for their positions, standing up, understanding that their value in the workplace. So it's good to see this, and I wish John Deere employees all the best.
Unfortunately, he didn't cover, I think he covered another video what John Deere was actually doing too. We mentioned like forcing other people to do jobs like in plants, which is not smart since that's not their skill. Like doing like work on a computer is a lot different from working in a plant making manufactured stuff. Like it's vastly different. It's like forcing, and unfortunately, I think there's been accidents where people got hurt at plants because they don't know what they're doing, and also it's caused problems with the service sector too because they're getting overworked because now they're doing multiple things at once. Like eventually, you need to just accept the fact you need to just cave and give them what they want on everything, and that's the end of it. So, hopefully they succeed. Hopefully everyone else succeeds. Hopefully this encourages just a mass strike movement for the next several months and years until we get everything we want. Anything else you have to say about that?
I agree. I don't really have that much to say. I just hope that it burns internationally as well.
Yep. Alright, so now, let's get on to some Covidiots I'm making fun of people dying for, like, really no reason. So, of course, we start off with Colin Powell. Now, of course, this is actually a topic about two different angles about this. Who he is and how he died. Now, first off, we're going to talk about who he is. For all of you who don't know, Colin Powell was Secretary of State, I believe, during Bush's first term, and he was one of the main people that helped get the Iraq war to happen. So, that is very, very bad. On the low end alone, several thousand Americans and other allied troops died, but up to, on the low end, like 500,000 to up to like 2 million Iraqis were killed, and let's like I think up to like 5 to 10 million of them being displaced because of the Iraq war. And all for nothing, too. So, he's a war criminal, and he should not get any sort of praise whatsoever. But unfortunately, he is, because he has very good PR spin about him over the years, because he's kind of like backed off of it just a little bit with the Iraq war, somewhat. And of course,
he probably would have supported nuking Iraq back in 2003.
And of course,
bombing Iraq into the stratosphere.
And of course, he's also become a media darling because, like, he's basically like flipped pretty much politically. Now he's like rah Team Democrat. He actually supported all the Democratic presidential candidates since he's left. Supported like gay rights and all that crap. Like, he's like flipped on the Republican Party like completely. So because of that, now he's like a darling on the mainstream media and all that. And of course,
on racist terrorist media.
Yep. So he died recently because of COVID. So that was the first thing we covered, who he is and why he does not deserve any praise whatsoever. And I don't care that he was the first black Secretary of State. I don't care if he's voted for Democrats every time. I don't care if he's for gay marriage and all that.
He's still a terrorist.
Yeah, you can't. It doesn't change it. Like, he's a bad person, and he deserves no praise whatsoever. Now, with that being said, though, now we gotta talk about how he died, and of course we mentioned COVID. Now, he was actually vaccinated twice, so he did literally everything he had to do, but unfortunately he died still because of COVID, and of course Covidiots are used this as an example of, see, he took 2 vaccines, he did everything, and he still died because of COVID, because the vaccines don't work, stupid. But there's one thing, well, actually multiple things that they're leaving out on purpose. One, he's old. He was 84. He is old as shit. That is in the category of, like, I think it was like up to maybe like 6% of people his age that get COVID can die. Like, he is like, like he's in like the worst age range in that regard. He's old, and what was all the things you mentioned earlier before we got the filming?
Okay, so he had just gotten over cancer, and so straight away he has no immune system. Absolutely no immune system. So already you've got a problem there. You've got other problems. You've got, basically that's the big one. He was fighting cancer for ages, and so his immune system was basically zero. And when it came to, I believe he got it, did he get that before? Did he have to fight off the cancer before or after he got the vaccine? So I assume it'd be after.
I have no idea. But of course there was also
if it was after, then it basically completely reset his immune system to zero. And that would mean it would be as if he wasn't vaccinated at all.
And then of course there were other things he had too that Kyle covered, but I can't remember all of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which we'll probably watch a video too about that. But guess what, you idiots? The fact he was like the very rare, unique exception to people that actually tried to protect themselves from COVID, but still died because of it, because he was old and he had massive underlying issues. So that does not mean that the vaccine doesn't work. You fucking idiots! Like, God. So now let's go watch Kyle's video on it.
Just getting some breaking news about an hour or two ago. Apparently, Colin Powell. And I'm going to say his name Colin. It's spelled Colin. If I didn't hear other people say it, I would say Colin. But people say Colin. People pronounce it all sorts of different ways. I don't know how he wanted to pronounce it. It says Colin, so I'm just going to say Colin from now on, even though I'm probably not going to have to say his name ever again. But so Colin Powell passed away at the age of 84, and he died from COVID. Now, he was also fully vaccinated. More on that in a little bit. We're going to get to more of that a little bit later. But first and foremost, I wanted to talk a little bit about the reaction. So there has been a colossal outpouring of support, and a lot of people calling him an American hero. And this leads into the age-old conversation that we have every time somebody well-known dies, or some very political figure dies. The question is, what is the proper etiquette and decorum in terms of dealing with their record and dealing with either the good things that they've done or the colossal harm that they've caused? And Colin Powell is actually a very, very, very interesting case, because this is a man who had fantastic PR. Even though he was one of the most important, one of the key players, one of the most consequential figures in helping to lie us into the Iraq War. Now, some of the people who listen to the show are pretty young. There's a lot of millennials who listen to the show. Some Gen Xers, fewer boomers, maybe a handful of silent generation folks. But for the Gen Z people who are watching this, who might not know the ins and outs and the details of Colin Powell, so he, of course, worked his way up the ranks in the military, and he became our first African-American Secretary of State. And as George W. Bush's Secretary of State, he famously went to the UN and held up a vial to make the case that, look, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, and here's some evidence of his weapons of mass destruction, and therefore, we gotta do what we gotta do. We gotta keep the world safe. America has to invade. America has to protect democracy and freedom around the world and get rid of the big bad dictator. That was the defining moment of his legacy and his life. And what you're seeing in the media is almost no commentary on that whatsoever, and instead the focus is first African-American Secretary of State, so he gets praised over that, and you're seeing that he was disillusioned with Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and so he left the Republican Party. I think he endorsed Barack Obama in 2008, and he endorsed Joe Biden in 2016, and so towards the end of his life, he was a much bigger supporter of Democrats because he felt like the Republicans had gone insane. Now, it is true the Republicans had gone insane, but what's also true is he was a part of that because he helped lie us into an illegal and offensive war against a country that didn't attack us. Now, he did it with all of the civility and decorum in the world. He did it with all the grace you can imagine. He put on a very good veneer and facade of polite society, but he helped lie us into an illegal and offensive war that led to the deaths of at least 200,000 innocent civilians. Some estimates have upwards of 1 million innocent civilians, and of course, wasted trillions of dollars. Military-industrial complex price gouged us to the high heavens. And not only do we have nothing to show for it, there were countless war crimes. So one can definitely make the case. This is a war criminal. There's a war criminal with fantastic PR who's beloved in U.S. media, sort of like John McCain. So there's an article in the media I put out. I'll read you a little bit from it. The headline is, "A Genuine American Hero. The Death of Colin Powell Sets Off Massive Bipartisan Tribute." And I'll just read you some of this. Powell, who, despite being fully vaccinated, died from COVID-19 Monday at the age of 84. Again, more on that later. Hold your horses on any conclusions you might have on that front. Was lauded Monday morning as a trailblazer and a towering figure in American life. He served as Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs under former President George W. Bush, who was the first African-American to hold those positions. In a statement, the former president honored Powell, who he lauded as a family man and a friend. So George W. Bush released a statement. We don't need to go through the statement, but of course, deeply saddened by the death, great public servant, so on and so forth. Until recently, Powell was a member of the Republican Party. He was a vocal critic of Donald Trump and spoke at the 2020 DNC on behalf of Biden. Following the January 6th riot, he said, "I can no longer call myself Republican." Funny that it took that long. You know, a lot of people should have said, "I will no longer call myself Republican," when they lied us into an illegal and offensive war, but I repeat myself. So congressional Republicans and Democrats and other public servants came together Monday morning to mourn the loss of the former Secretary of State, Representative Elise Stefanik. I am saddened to hear, I think she's a Republican, I'm saddened to hear that 4-star General Colin Powell, former U.S. Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, has passed away. America has lost a true leader and American patriot, but we will always remember his service to the United States of America. Representative Vern Buchanan. By the way, I don't know more than half of the people in Congress. Vern Buchanan, that sounds like a fake person. Saddened to hear of the passing of General Colin Powell, former U.S. Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an incredible statesman, an American hero. And then it goes on. Mark Warner, he's a Democrat in the Senate. Who else do we have here? Adriano Espaillat. Don't know who that is. Definitely in the House of Representatives. David Cicilline. Don't know if he's a Democrat or Republican, but you get the gist. You have Democrats and Republicans who are elites, who are in the halls of power, who are heaping praise on this man. Now, I must say, I saw the news of his passing, and my initial reaction was not, hey, you know what, I'm going to cover this. Because the legacy is complicated. Is it wonderful that he was the first black Secretary of State? Absolutely. Is it wonderful that he held many other positions where he was the first African-American in that position? Sure, absolutely. But since he is a war criminal, and he did help lie us into an illegal and offensive war, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to let this one slide and not cover it, because again, my instinct is I never want to tap dance on anybody's grave, because I do think there's something that's non-lefty about that, and anti-humanitarian about that. But last time we had this conversation, I did sort of lay out my ground rules for you guys, and there's one part I mentioned which reoccurred to me, let's say. Even if somebody's a piece of garbage with their opinions, and they're a colossal asshole, and they're a bigot, or whatever, I look at those people and I still can't say, you know, I wish harm on them or I wish death on them, because that says a lot more about you than it does about them. Because it's not like the penalty for being a colossal asshole should be death. Like, you should die as a result of that. Because then, again, there's something that's non-human about that in a way that disturbs me, and it's sort of like an authoritarian response, and, you know, like wishing ill on everybody who doesn't agree with you seems fucked up. But I did say, and I stand by this, I do have one real reservation on that front, which is war criminals. If somebody's a war criminal, and honestly, you know, I'd probably make an exception as well for hardcore criminals, serial killers, things of that nature. No, I actually don't think that instinct makes sense on that front. Especially when there is a bunch of heaping, fawning, over-the-top praise and a flat-out deflection and obfuscation from the real record and the crimes that were committed. And that's what's happening with Colin Powell. It's so positive, it's so overwhelming, it's so over-the-top that now I feel like I have to come out and say, hey, just FYI so everybody knows.
What?
Should have been locked up in fucking Guantanamo Bay or something.
Yep.
He helped lie us into an illegal and offensive war that killed minimum hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, maybe over 1 million innocent civilians. And, there's a great tweet from Alex Perrine who said, here, actually, you know what? Let me read it to you, because if I try to retell it, I'm going to fuck it up in about 14 ways. Here it is. So Owen Higgins said, Colin Powell is going to be remembered today as a statesman, but he should be remembered for using his gravitas to sell a war he knew was a lie. And then Alex Perrine says, an exemplary figure of this age in that he convinced himself that remaining in his position of power despite his private misgivings was more honorable than airing those misgivings, which he'd do years after it mattered. So in other words, way after he sold the war, he was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But he convinced himself the right thing to do is to keep my position of power and do what the bosses tell me, and the bosses tell me go sell this war. And so I'm going to go sell this war. And so I do feel compelled to repeat the fact that he's a war criminal, specifically because in mainstream media you're not going to hear about this perspective. The elites are going to cover up the crimes because a lot of the other elites are also guilty of crimes. They want the falling praise when they pass away. Well, no. There's the whole point of alternative media and independent media. We're here to correct the record. If you've got the facts and you make
since then changes them.
Yep.
Make up your own goddamn mind. Now, again, my instinct is I don't tap dance on anybody's grave. I think that there's something gross about that. But do I begrudge anybody who sort of has that reaction when it's a war criminal? I can't begrudge you that. Imagine you're, a mother and you lost your son in Iraq and you see this falling praise for this guy who helped lie us into that war where your son was killed. How's she going to react? How's she going to feel? And to whitewash that record and pretend like, no, this guy was just a hero. Come on, it's incredibly misleading and it's messed up. Now, I told you guys I'd come back to the fact that he was fully vaccinated and he died of COVID-19. Here is what you guys absolutely, positively need to understand. I understand that the anti-vax crowd is going to be all over this, and they're going to use this as what they think is evidence for their worldview, which is, well, of course, the vaccine does nothing. Colin Powell was fully vaccinated and he died. Colin Powell was suffering from multiple myeloma. It's a blood cancer that directly harms the body's ability to fight infections. So he's 84 years old. He has blood cancer, which makes him not able to fight off infections well. And then also, I just learned, he apparently had Parkinson's too. 84 years old, blood cancer, Parkinson's, vaccinated but ended up dying of COVID. Now, in fact, I'll throw it up on the screen for you guys right now just so you get a sense of this. This is in The Guardian. A French study of over 22 million people finds vaccines cut severe COVID risk by 90%. 90%.
Oh, yeah? Well, they're liberal, so who cares what they think?
In fact, let me show you another chart here. This is in Science News, and this shows just how well the vaccines are actually doing their jobs. You can see here, so rate per 100,000 in the population, this is hospitalizations for COVID-19. Look at the line for fully vaccinated people and look at the line for unvaccinated people. So in other words, well over 90% of the time, the people who get severe COVID, the people who are hospitalized for COVID, and the people who die of COVID are unvaccinated. Now, I just told you though, it's 90%. Vaccines cut severe COVID risk by 90%. You know what that means? There's a small percentage, a very small percentage where it's still not enough and you can still get COVID and die. But usually in those instances, it's people who are very elderly or people who have some other factor which might make them unable to fight off the virus.
Powell had.
And that's exactly what we had with Colin Powell. 84 years old, blood cancer, Parkinson's, and it wasn't enough. Now, does that mean the vaccines don't work? No, because again, you have to look at the data and you have to prioritize that over anecdotes. And unfortunately, in our primitive monkey brains, people really grasp and hold on to anecdotes, and they don't really look at the macro picture. They're obsessed with the micro picture, especially when it comes from a source that they personally trust. If it's a friend or a family member says, I know a guy who X, Y, or Z happened, like Nicki Minaj with his cousin's friend and the swollen ball sack. For whatever reason, our primitive brains grasp onto those things and hold on to those things and think that disproves the efficacy of the vaccine. When you look at the overall data and you look at the macro picture, it's crystal clear that the vaccines are, widely successful and work very well. This just happens to be an instance where between being 84 years old, the blood cancer, and Parkinson's, it wasn't enough. So there you have it. That's the breakdown of Colin Powell and his death. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I'm saying anything that's, particularly controversial here, but you're not going to hear this perspective in many other places, and that's a very sad thing.
Yep, exactly. So what do you guys say about this?
CovidiotS, not surprising. Colin Powell, he literally had no chance against the vaccine.
That doesn't make him a good person still with all the things that happened afterwards.
Still makes him evil.
And also, that doesn't mean that the vaccine doesn't work, you Covidiots.
Yep.
Alright.
Now, speaking of Covidiots,
we're gonna make fun of Dennis Prager!
We got infected by COVID.
Yay! We're gonna go watch Mike make fun of Dennis Prager. And of course, for anyone that don't know, Dennis Prager is some idiot far-right religious fundamentalist dipshit who runs PragerU, which we hope to one day in future do a whole episode making fun of their videos. Wouldn't that be fun? Making fun of stupidity.
Yeah.
So, of course, Dennis Prager, who also denies the vaccine at all costs, got COVID recently. and he tried to rationalize it to his core that he actually wanted it. Here we go.
Dennis Prager, who is the founder of PragerU, not a real university, by the way, he announced that he has COVID-19. Now, in this video where he explains that he was diagnosed with COVID-19, you're going to hear him talk about how stoked he is that he got COVID-19. In fact, he went out of his way to try to get infected with COVID-19. I'm not memeing, I'm not making this up. You are going to hear a grown adult say why he's actually glad that he has COVID-19 and why he wanted COVID-19.
I'm broadcasting from my home because I'm not going into the station as I have COVID. I was tested positive last week. And I have been steadily improving. At
you
no
don't
point
sound like
was
it.
I in danger of hospitalization.
Yeah, like I said, you don't sound like you're improving. You sound like you're in pretty damn bad shape.
I have received monoclonal antibodies. That's Regeneron. I have, of course, for years, a year and a half, not years, been taking hydroxychloroquine from the beginning with zinc. I've taken Z-Pak,
so take everything but the vaccine that's proven to work.
As the Zelenko protocol would have it, I have taken...
You're doing a Joe Rogan treatment, I see.
I have done what a person should do if one is not going to get vaccinated.
But the vaccine would help you, you idiot.
To have natural immunity.
It actually would work. Immunity.
And that is what I hoped for the entire time. Hence, I engaged with strangers, constantly hugging them, taking photos with them, knowing that I was making myself very susceptible to getting COVID, which is indeed, as bizarre as it sounded, what I wanted, in the hope that I would achieve natural immunity and be taken care of by...
I don't know about you, but I really think he doesn't actually think that. I think he's just saying that because, as Mike pointed out later, he just doesn't want to admit the fact that he was wrong and us libtards were correct, and he's trying to prevent that owning, even though he is owning, and he's so owning that he is probably going to die for it because of it.
Dying of COVID to own the libs. Typical conservative dipshittery.
Don't you feel so owned when you are alive?
Therapeutics. That is exactly what has happened. It should have happened to the great majority of Americans. The number of deaths in this country owing to COVID is a scandal, which one day will be clear.
It's a scandal!
He's 73 years old, he's unvaccinated, and you just heard him say he tried to get COVID-19. Okay, I mean, it's certainly a gamble, nonetheless. If this is what you wanted, you do have the freedom to give yourself COVID-19. Now, his reasoning is incorrect. He claims that the natural immunity is infinitely preferable than vaccine immunity.
No, it's not!
He's factually incorrect about that. In fact, a study from Kentucky found that people who previously had COVID-19 were actually twice as likely to be reinfected compared with those who were fully vaccinated. Also, the vaccines offer better protection than natural immunity. So even if you previously had COVID-19, yes, you should still get vaccinated.
Oh, how's it feel? Prager coping when science proves your feelings wrong again, as always. Oh.
Yeah. Now, even if he's correct that natural immunity was better, like it gave you more protection from the virus than the vaccines, it's still more preferable to get vaccinated because in order to get said natural immunity, you still have to get infected with COVID-19. You risk dying. You risk living with health complications for years. So vaccine deniers, their logic, people who are vaccine hesitant, anti-vaxxers, it doesn't make sense. And come to find out, there was a study, I can't remember who conducted the study, that showed that conspiracy theorists actually lack critical thinking skills. So that's the least surprising outcome ever, but it's true when you see that this dude is saying he literally wanted to get COVID-19 so he can get natural immunity and be protected from COVID-19. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, part of it is me thinking that he's lying. He doesn't actually want this. He didn't try to get it, but he doesn't want the libs to kind of laugh at him and say, well, you should have got the vaccine. You were an anti-vaxxer. In fact, he once proclaimed that he knows more than doctors. So he doesn't...
Yes. A far-right religious fundamentalist that denies COVID probably even exists. He knows more than the doctors, of course. Did you know that? He's a genius at this shit.
It's being beyond stupid, though.
Liberals to be proven correct. He doesn't want them to say, see, you should have gotten
what was this?
Doctors. So he doesn't want...
Dennis Prager licks dirty forks to show COVID who's boss. What the fuck? That sounds like a Karen at the... That sounds like the stupid Karens at grocery stores over the years. Dude! What the fuck? The man literally said he eats food from forks that have fallen on restaurant floors as proof that you don't have to worry about the virus.
Yep, deliberately catching COVID to own the libs. Typical Dennis Prager, 0 IQ.
And also other diseases, probably.
Liberals to be proven correct. He doesn't want them to say, see, you should have gotten the vaccine. Maybe this could have been prevented. So I think that he's just saying this as a means of coping. Who would want to get COVID-19? That doesn't make sense.
He's
it's like saying,
coping
well, I want
very
to get
hard.
the Black Plague, so I don't get the Black Plague, so I get that natural immunity. I mean, it's mind-bending, right? It's stupid. But this is political discourse in 2021 in America. Now, there's a couple of other things that he says here that is absolutely incorrect. He says, I've received monoclonal antibodies. That's Regeneron. That's one thing that he should be doing. But on top of that, he says, I have taken ivermectin. I've done what a person should do if one is not going to get vaccinated, except ivermectin has not been proven to be effective in treating COVID-19. There is no evidence that this is
You know what? He's probably taking remdesivir as well, which is an antiviral that's actually been shown to treat COVID.
Haven't done what a person should do if one is not going to get vaccinated. And the point is that you should get vaccinated, especially if you're 73 years old like Dennis Prager. I mean, you're really rolling the dice here, my man, but this is what he wanted to do. Now, there's a chance that he is actually vaccinated. I don't know.
It's actually true.
Hosts like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham.
Maybe
he's reacting as badly as he is to COVID. Then he is not vaccinated.
But that is also true that we've seen so many far-right dipshits lie about not getting vaccinated, like Tucker Carlson.
Where they will spread vaccine misinformation and fearmonger about the vaccines, but yet they themselves are vaccinated. But then again, there's a lot of right-wing radio hosts who they actually drank the Kool-Aid that they were giving to other people, and they did actually contract COVID-19 and die because they weren't vaccinated. So I don't know which camp Dennis Prager is in, but as one person on Twitter put it, I wish I could give them credit, but they said, look, we're going to find out if he's telling the truth. Because this virus, especially the Delta variant, is absolutely more severe. So I don't know what to say. Dennis Prager, at least he has some level of self-awareness to acknowledge that what he's saying is bizarre. So he says here that I have engaged with strangers, constantly hugging them, taking photos with them, knowing that I was making myself very susceptible to getting COVID, which is indeed, as bizarre as it sounded, what I wanted in hope I would achieve natural immunity. This logic is so insane to me. If you want a level of protection against this virus, get the fucking vaccine, but he doesn't want to do that. So he's doing everything he can to avoid getting the vaccine. But I mean, again, who knows if he actually did or did not take it. But certainly what he says is dangerous because he's discouraging his listeners from getting the vaccine. Listeners who are probably pretty old, who if they actually took his advice, they would be putting their lives in danger. So, I mean, there you have it. Dennis Prager has COVID-19 and he is totally excited about it. He's ecstatic. You can hear the excitement in his voice. Definitely not coping. He's really happy that he got COVID-19 because now he's going to have that sweet, sweet natural immunity.
And then maybe in the grave very soon, too.
You still need to get the vaccine if you want to be protected, if you're lucky enough to survive this. But
I do not wish death on Dennis Prager, but if he dies, I will read his obituary with great joy.
And then we have no more PragerU to deal with in their older videos.
He will be okay because he is very, very wealthy. He has an estimated net worth of, I think, $10 million. So he's going to get the best medical care that is offered in this country. So I think that he's probably going to be okay. But either way, he's not going to have a fun time. This is no fun ride that he's going to experience, even if he's going to try to downplay it. But either way, he claims this is what he wanted. So, okay, man, have fun.
But, Mike, having COVID's fun if it triggers you libtards. So, what do you guys say about the Covidiot Prager?
I'm not surprised that after catching COVID, that Dennis Prager's like, I wanted I was trying to get it,
and then you'll be dead. I'm kind of sad that we didn't save the funny one for last because now we're going to have to unfortunately get angry to wrap up this episode. And that is Biden
caving and deciding, you know what, there's going to be no infrastructure bill. Just like Manchin and Sienna really wants. I think there actually was a thing yesterday that actually confirmed that Manchin wants a $0 infrastructure bill.
I would not be surprised. So, of course, I think we talked about this in the last episode, where the progressives are trying to get a reconciliation bill passed along with an infrastructure bill that had so many awesome things in it, but of course, Manchin and Sinema are opposing it and blocking it, even though they agreed that this was going to be linked together. So they're a bunch of lying pieces of shit as always. And unfortunately, It was originally, I think, supposed to be like $6 trillion over 10 years. Then it got knocked down to $3.5 trillion. Now, Biden, being a cuck, knocked it down to like $1.5 trillion or something like that. And of course...
And he's probably just going to abandon it in the next week.
Of course he would, as always.
Reduce it to zero.
And then people have a surprised Pikachu face that he would do that. So, of course, Kyle covered it and had an absolutely well-deserved meltdown on it. So let's watch it to wrap up the episode and get mad.
I like to consider myself a fair dude when I don't like a politician and they do something good. I don't care that I don't like them. I'll tell you that they did something good. In fact, I pride myself on that fact. So, for example, my distaste of Joe Biden is very well known and very well documented to anybody who's followed the show for an extended period of time. But when Joe Biden fully pulled out of Afghanistan, I said, this is a good thing. And they get dogpiled by elite media over that. And I didn't see many lefties come to his defense.
We did, that's for sure.
And I think that is incredibly hacky, because we've been saying for the longest time we want somebody to fully pull out of Afghanistan. Then he does that, and then you hear crickets. Now, it also is the case that he did a horrendous war crime drone strike that killed innocent civilians. And I pointed that out as well, because again, you have to be intellectually honest. That has to come before any ideological concerns or any personal gripes. Another thing that I brought up on this show and continue to bring up on this show, which I don't see any other lefty commentators do, is that Joe Biden signed an executive order to raise the minimum wage for every single federal government employee and every single federal government contractor, which applies to over 400,000 people, and it was a $15 minimum wage. Now, he also failed to get it into the last reconciliation bill, which was a colossal failure. But you have to point out both those things because both those things are true. I thought Joe Biden was not in favor of the $15 minimum wage. I thought he was honestly lying about that every step of the way. He did that weird hostage video with Bernie where Bernie was like, well, Joe, do you support the $15 an hour minimum wage? And Biden was half asleep in a zombie like, yeah, Bernie, what I do? What are we talking about again? I was like, this dude doesn't support a $15 an hour minimum wage. I was wrong. He signed an executive order to raise the federal government minimum wage to $50 an hour. Now, again, he has no idea how to fight because he's weak, so he wasn't able to get into the reconciliation bill. But you have to talk about both those things because within the nuance of that and the complexity of that lies the truth. And a lot of people pretend to be truth tellers and they don't tell you the whole truth. So I tell you all of that to tell you this. The question has now come up. Is Joe Biden getting rolled and giving away the farm in this $3.5 trillion reconciliation negotiation?
Yeah,
And
he's just lowered it to zero.
Folks, so let me give you the update here. This is from Manu Raju of CNN. They're looking at community college scholarships. Also, Medicare expansion is still on the table, as is universal pre-K and ACA funding. That's Obamacare funding. Dems had discussed with Biden $300 billion for climate change measures, but it's not clear how that shakes out. Price tag around $2 trillion. Okay, so you read that and you say community college sort of being stripped out is bad, but all in all, not terrible. Well, now it gets terrible. New, Biden told House progressives tuition-free community college is out of the package per multiple sources. Child tax credit won't go as far as some would like. Likely a 1-year extension, as opposed to a 10 or a 5. Home healthcare likely less than $250 billion. Dems had wanted $400 billion. Climate change, still a debate. But we're not done yet. Jeff Stein says, White House comes down again. Intense fears among many Dems right now. They'll get a medley of largely temporary half measures. And then it says news. Per 4 sources, 4. Biden floats a slightly smaller $1.75 trillion to $1.9 trillion package to House progressives, plus just a 1-year extension of the child tax credit. So, if you've been following along, the left-wing position was about $10 trillion. Biden wanted $6 trillion. There was the reconciliation package negotiation behind the scenes for which Bernie played a pivotal role. He was able to get us a $3.5 trillion bill. Now, if that bill passed in its entirety, it would have been wonderful. However, I'm not a bullshitter, so I'm not going to lie to you and say that that really had a chance of getting through. But what I've told you guys from the beginning is absolute bare minimum, complete floor would be what? $2 trillion. And again, this is my personal reading of the situation, what I think is gettable and what I think is sufficient. $2 trillion floor, absolute floor, no climate, no deal, and absolutely no means testing in the bill. Well, guess what? It's failing the most basic of the basic litmus test. Now we're talking about 1.75 to 1.9 trillion, and just so everybody understands, whenever it's presented as this or this, it is 100% of the time the lower number. So it's a $1.75 trillion bill we're talking about, and we're told Biden is now trying to sell progressives on that behind the scenes. Here's my answer on this front.
I can tell you now, it's going to go down. It's going to be knocked down to zero soon.
Not in a million years. I vote no, and I vote no with a smile on my face.
Same here.
Here's the thing that drives me.
And all the progressives in Congress, you better do the exact same thing too. Vote no on it, break, destroy it, and then put the blame on Manchin and Sinema and force it back up again until they cave.
It's crazy. If I got the sense that there was an adequate plan behind the scenes from Joe Biden, if I got the sense they were truly negotiating in a way that's even mildly sufficient, then it'd be easier to swallow some of these sour-ass pills. But you and I both know that's not what's happening. And you and I both know Biden probably doesn't really care about the specifics in this reconciliation bill. Biden, my guess is, wants the original $1 or $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill that already passed the Senate. He wants that to pass, because a lot of that is a corporate giveaway, by the way, with some really good provisions about updating our infrastructure and things of that nature, traditional infrastructure. He wants that package, and then I don't think he cares if the next package is $1 trillion. I don't think he cares. Because he just wants to say, in a similar way to what Obama did, I got something passed, now get off my ass. He wants to be able to pat himself on the back and say, I'm the great unifier. I told you I could get these Republicans to come along, and I told you, I could get something done. Well, here it is. Well, in the case of Obama, you got Obamacare done, which was a giant giveaway to the health insurance companies, which kept the for-profit health insurance companies in the driver's seat, which made them phenomenally wealthy, and didn't even give all Americans health care. It was a Heritage Foundation plan, which is a right-wing think tank. That's what Obama got done. But he went out there and said, look, I'm the great deal maker. By the way, the great deal maker, even though not a single Republican voted for Obamacare. And it's probably going to be the same thing with this. No matter how small the reconciliation bill is, no Republican's going to vote for it anyway. So you're not some sort of great bipartisan deal maker. You're, trying to put together a coalition of just the people in your own party, and you're letting President Sinema and VP Manchin control the terms of the entire debate. And at this point, I have no doubt that what's going on behind the scenes is they're the ones who are throwing jabs and throwing hooks and throwing uppercuts, and it's Joe Biden who's on the defensive and compromising on the compromise of the compromise of the compromise. And that's totally unacceptable. And what progressives need to understand is, if you go along with this, nobody will ever take you seriously ever again, and they'd be correct to do that. They'd be correct. Now, early on in this process, progressives did the right thing. When there was an attempt
voted out in the next election
to de-link the human infrastructure bill from the traditional infrastructure bill. They said, hell no, we're going to vote as a block. Well, now this is another test. Like I said, I could accept a deal of $2 trillion or more, but there has to be climate stuff in there, and there has to be no means testing. What we're looking at now is a bill that is very likely under the $2 trillion number. Means testing is 50-50 as to whether or not it'll be in there. Hopefully it's not. And it looks like the climate stuff is so incredibly inadequate that it's laughable. And again, this is what happens when you have Joe Manchin as the head of the committee that's going to determine the climate stuff. So what do you do? Well, I don't know how many times I could give you guys the basic formula here, but I'm going to do it again, because apparently I'm the only person saying it. You have leverage over Manchin and Sinema. You do. Particularly over Manchin. You have a tremendous amount of leverage. Why? Because Joe Manchin is part of a crime family. We just got leaks, emails from Joe Manchin's daughter, who works for a pharmaceutical company, I believe, called Mylan, and she was part of
this again.
Yeah.
Dude. Okay. I know it is tempting to go to do that.
Yes,
but it's fucking impeachable.
Yeah.
You're impeached for that.
This is something that Trump would do, Kyle, and we know for a fact you would criticize Trump and call for his impeachment in this circumstances. So why are you saying Biden should do the exact same thing, which is illegal? Think about it for just a little bit. Oh, if you vote for this policy, I'm not going to have my DOJ go after your kid who did something illegal. Like, how do you not see that? Are you that, blinded by you wanting to get this bill passed or something? Like, come on. Like, dude. And then, of course, his one about Sinema, too, where if you vote for this, we'll get maybe one of your family members in a position of power. That's corruption and nepotism, too, somewhat, too. Like, dude.
EpiPen, price fixing, price gouging. They have
politics.
That's cool.
What you do, you twist their arm, and you throw, and you also have offer big investments in their state.
And
in states,
yeah,
if they don't do that, that's when you throw the huge advertising stuff slamming them for it.
Yep, and you also
they decided that they're not going to put it. They're going to help with your stuff,
and also point out the fact that your constituents don't agree with you; they agree with me. Like Kyle and others covered, it was 80 to 90% of West Virginian Democrats support this reconciliation bill. It's like, come on, you're the minority, so shut the fuck up and deal with it. And of course, I don't even know if I really want to watch the next minute because Kyle talks about this stupid policy idea he has. So I'm going to skip forward.
So you have to tell Joe Manchin, look, it's this or that. It's carrot or stick. It's to steal a phrase from Malcolm X's Battle or the Bullet. Oh, it doesn't really fit.
That's true, Kyle, but not the way you want to do it.
And you get some perks. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. If you vote the right way, I'll give you another military base in West Virginia. I'll give you extra infrastructure money. I'll give some whoever.
Now that's a little bit better.
If you want a job administration, you're going to get it. I'll give you whatever you want. But if you vote against it, somebody in your family is going to prison. And it might be you. It'll probably be your daughter.
Although they need to go to prison regardless if he votes on it or not. You can't let someone go like that at all.
Now, that's hard-ass politics. That's mafia bullshit. But it is also, I have no doubt, exactly what Lyndon B. Johnson would have done or FDR would have done. It's what they would have done. So, you don't really want it unless You do that unless you get to that point. You don't care unless you get to that point. Now, if you want to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, okay, hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But then you're going to get a package that's wildly insufficient. And the other thing is,
be a corporate Democrat at that point. You start taking corrupt money, and then you get voted out in 2022.
Point that.
Well, Sinema is up for re-election. Sadly, Manchin's not up till 2024.
I read last night. I thought it was wonderful.
I was also mentioning the progressives.
Yep, it's true. We got to vote every one of these corporate Democrats and the Republicans too. We got to get them all out and replace them with progressives any chance we get.
If you're going to have a package that's small, that's like 1.75 trillion or whatever, you would be better off picking 2 big programs and fully funding them in a universal sense for 10 years, as opposed to this piecemeal approach where it's a bunch of little half measures. But there's a reason why they can't do that, which is the political reality that you can't hold together the coalition unless people get the little things that they care about. Senators get the little things they care about, and the senators care about different things. So, you can't do, let's say, universal free pay for the entire country for 10 years and free college for the entire country for 10 years. And because then the people who are in it for elder care, or the people who are in it for the child tax credit, they don't get the thing that they want, so the coalition falls apart. So you're really holding it together with duct tape and bubblegum at that point. So you can't do that approach, even though that approach would politically help way more. But look at where we are now. Look at where we stand. Joe Manchin is in the driver's seat, even though Biden has leverage to use on him. And Kirsten Sinema, now she's the one who's really the wild card, because as I told you, I'm not convinced she wants to stay in D.C. She very well may have plans of leaving and go and work it as a soulless lobbyist for some mega corporate.
And you know what else? Regardless if she stays or not, this is a perfect opportunity because her polls have tanked among Democrats in Arizona. This is a perfect opportunity to replace her with a progressive. Either she does leave or she decides to run again. Now with those poll numbers, you ain't.
And if that's the case, what leverage can you use when she's out no matter what you do? You can't force her to do something if she doesn't have, re-election hopes. So you just have to hope that she's not already planning on ditching D.C. And honestly, it's a 50-50 question. I don't know. Maybe she does want to stay. Maybe she doesn't. I don't know. Some actions indicate she wants to leave. But also politicians rarely want to give up power. And Dianne Feinstein's 1,000 years old and literally losing her mind. And she's in there. Chuck Grassley's 9 years old and he wants to run for re-election. So I don't know. But you still have to try to play hardball with her. You still have to try the power stick approach with her. You still have to do the mafia ball shit with her too. You still have to...
Maybe you could try and maybe make some sort of legacy argument. That's the only thing I can think off the top of my head.
Let her know.
If you don't vote for this, you're gonna look terrible in long term.
No, I'll give you what you want if you do the right thing. If you don't, here are going to be the punishments. Here are going to be the consequences. You're never going to have a job at DC again. I, Joe Biden, will personally call the heads of all the corporations and say, don't give her a job if she leaves. You're the president.
Yeah, that actually would probably have a lot of sway if Biden did that, because he is the president, for God's sake. That would have a lot of sway if he did that.
His power. You can flex it. You can flex it. So,
but that's the problem. He doesn't want to, though.
It looks like at the last minute, Joe Biden is giving away the farm. And if these are the terms of the deal, then I say hell no. Now, even if you play hardball, and this is where, I changed the conversation and I'm talking to my friends on the left. Even if you play hardball, you might only be able to get a $2.5 trillion deal. But $2.5 trillion is doable as long as there's climate in there and there's no meat testing in there. And it's acceptable, and I would vote for it. But now we're talking about $1.75 trillion giving away the farm, and it's honestly a joke of a bill. So this is my message to progressive lawmakers is...
Yeah, now eventually that'll soon become a $0
don't vote for this one. Yep. If these are the terms of the deal, no way.
Well, absolutely nothing instead of tense measures.
Yep, so as Kyle says, to all the progressives in Congress, vote no on this.
Hardball, maybe there's if Joe Biden did the right thing and approaches...
Or you will be primary.
There is a 20 or 30% chance he could have gotten him on $3.5 trillion, I'm not naive. I know it's still not likely even if you play politics the right way. But definitely if you play politics the right way, I think he could get him on $2 trillion or more, $2.5 trillion, maybe $2.9 trillion. But he's not doing it the right way, which is pathetic because what we have right now is a transformational moment in American history, and we have a status quo incrementalism president. And it's just not going to cut it. And the Democrats are looking like they're going to get absolutely...
Like climate change, for example, that can't wait. It has to be resolved right now.
So it'll be clobbered in the midterms. So even for just... political reasons, not policy reasons, but political reasons. Even for political reasons, you have to try to save your own ass and throw a Hail Mary pass here and do something that's going to massively increase your approval rating, which right now is down in the dumps. So we could have had a phenomenal bill, but it looks like Joe Biden is ultimately going to be Joe Biden. So now it's on the left.
Because he doesn't give a shit in the end.
He doesn't want to do, and he doesn't want a bill.
I don't see any other way to handle this. You can't every single time there's a negotiation and there's a bill, except crumbs of the crumbs of the crumbs. Because you're never going to be taken seriously. And at least if you flex muscle now, people understand, really, you're in the driver's seat. Because there's only, literally, for this bill, there's only two hard-ass, basically Republican-like Democrats. So if there's two of them in the Senate, look at what? Let's say we have a dozen progressives in the House. who are willing to flex their power even more, that sends a message. And it sends a message that there's more of us and you're going to have to reckon with us. And now the deals are on our terms, son. So there you have it. Obviously, I still have my fingers crossed. I hope the reporting is wrong, or I hope somehow it can be over $2 trillion. But it doesn't look good at the moment. And if it doesn't look good and you're a progressive lawmaker, there's only one thing left to do. And they better have the balls to do it. And just
now, of course, the question is, would they
they
have
get,
it?
or they get a better thing to do it, or they're getting primary.
What was in the original $3.5 trillion package, which there was a chance you could get.
And as Kyle's about to mention, here's all the policies in this $3.5 trillion bill that must be in it.
You knew what you were doing politically behind the scenes in the negotiation. The original bill had child tax benefit, universal prepay, paid family leave, paid medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, dental, hearing, and vision Medicare expansion, housing, home care, major climate money, immigration, lower Medicare age, Obamacare expansion, and then increased taxes on the wealthy, not just raising the income tax, but also taxing corporation and fees on polluters and negotiating Medicare. So what could have been if FDR was sitting in that White House, or LBJ was sitting in that White House, or a half-competent president who really cared about this stuff was in the White House. But unfortunately, we have a half-asleep zombie who's willing to take the incrementalism on top of the incrementalism within the incrementalism. And here we are.
He goes to go backwards instead of going forward.
Yeah, because he doesn't give a shit about it. So yeah, what do you guys say about this?
There's not going to be a bill. Manchin's going to keep pushing it down and eventually get it down to zero.
And that's why we need to not let him...
And seriously, House progressives, you don't vote against this, you're getting fucking primary.
Yeah, you need to have a spine for once and say no. It ain't that hard. You're in the driver's seat. You managed to delay it multiple times. You're in the driver's seat. Manchin, Sinema or not. You need to force them to vote for this. And that's the end of it. Yeah. All right. So, those are all the topics for this episode. So, see you guys hopefully in 2 weeks. And hopefully our co-host, Harry, will come back soon eventually for that. Anything you have left to say before the episode ends?
Not really.
All right. So, see you guys next time.
All right.